Okay, so 7.1 focuses on factoring, and so we're gonna have a couple problems here that we're gonna look at. The first one deals with finding the greatest factoring out the greatest common factor out of two terms in this case. So the first thing I'm gonna look at is the number 32 and the number 40, and I'm gonna figure out what's the highest number that I can factor out of both of them. And if I look at it, well, 8 times 4 gives me 32. 8 times 5 gives me 40. So I know I can factor out an 8 out of both terms. Then what I'm going to do is look at the p to the 7th and p to the 5th and figure out, once again, what's the most or the greatest that I can factor out of that. Well, it's going to be p to the 5th power. Then we have q to the 3rd and q to the 5th. The most I can factor out of both of those would be q to the 3rd. And then I have r to the 4th and r. So, and of course, r means r to the 1st power. So the most I can factor out of that is an r. So that's what I'm going to factor out of both of these terms. So that's going to go on the outside of my parentheses. Inside is going to be what's left. So on this term here, what we factored out an 8, so we're left with 4. We factored out p to the 5th, so we're left with p to the 2nd. We're going to subtract it. We factored out q to the 3rd, so there's not going to be anything there. And then we factor out an r, so we're left with r to the 3rd. Now for the second term, we factored out 8, so we're left with 5. We factored out p to the 5th, so there's nothing there. We factored out q to the 3rd, so we're left with q to the 2nd. And we factored out an r, so there's nothing left. And that becomes my final answer. So when you're doing this, this is the part where you look for what's the most that you can take from both terms, or 3 terms, or 4 terms, how many you're given. And then you do the same thing with the variables, and then here's what's left. So that's factoring using the greatest common factor. Now the next one from the same page 440 deals with factoring by grouping. Now when factoring by grouping, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to kind of, in a sense, split it into 2 halves. So I'm going to look at this first half here and figure out what's the common factor here. So if I look at it, I know that I can factor out a 6. I can also factor out an a from both of these terms. That's going to leave me with, on this one, 2a, and on this here, I'm just going to be left with just 3. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here, and I'm going to figure out what I can factor out of that. And I know that I can factor out a 5 as well as a b. By doing that, I'm left with 2a plus 3. Now notice how these two are the same. So that's my clue to telling me that what I've done is the right step. So now I'm going to combine 6a and 5b together. And I'm only going to take one of these because they're the same. And there's my factored problem. So again, when you're doing it, just split up into halves. Figure out what you can factor out of this half. Figure out then what you can factor out of this half. You should be left with both of these the same. And then you combine these two together. And there's your answer.